Yeah, great. So for those who joined us last time for the part one of the 5 mistakes small businesses or business owners make when getting ready to sell, one of the biggest mistakes is not having a strategic plan. And essentially what that is strategic plan helps you create a roadmap for how to get from point A to point B. So when you are thinking about selling your business and you've taken the step of putting together a succession plan in place, it is now important to make sure that your succession plan dovetails well into your strategic plan. And how you do that is identifying the various initiatives that have been called out in your succession plan, as well as activities that need to be done to really optimize the valuation of your business. And when you've done that, you then really start to put together a plan for how to operate either for the next year or the number of years that are going to be required before you start to sell your business. So what you see here to the right is really just a sphere that's covering various aspects of your operations. There are various areas that may need to be addressed, particularly if you've done an evaluation of your business from the onset, just to get a sense for what it's valuing at and what can be done to really tweak the areas of your business to really improve the valuations of it. And based on that, you will then put in place a plan to really address those issues. So you align the goals and really think about the resources that you have available on a day-to-day basis to really put your strategic plan into action. So that's really operationalizing the plan. And we'll talk about the various steps to do that. But ultimately, how you track towards your goal is to ensure that you've developed the metrics to really help you measure your progress towards the goal. Metrics are important, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation a little bit more, because ultimately there are certain metrics that your industry or your sector will be measured against. So you want to make sure that you have that and take that into consideration as you're putting together your strategic plan, the action plan, and how you're tracking towards success. Next slide, please.
Yep, it should be there. Are you seeing it?
Oh, maybe I'm just a little behind. So this is really just a step-by-step process for how to get your strategic plan underway. A lot of times we create a plan, maybe we meet once at the start of the year and put the plan away and are not really working the strategic plan. But it's important to make sure that you're setting aside the time to plan at the onset, but also on an ongoing basis, just to make sure that you are working towards your goal. But at a high level, you want to predict the outlook, and having an initial evaluation will really help you understand where you are and what needs to be done. Assess your company's position, determine the areas of focus, start to really identify areas that you want to deep dive into, create an action plan. The action plan should then be your guide on a day-to-day basis for how you complete your work. Your staff should know what that action plan looks like. They should understand who's responsible for what's the timeline for when things will be completed, and ultimately have a plan for meeting on an ongoing basis just to make sure that you are working towards that plan. And then as you complete that, if there is a need to pivot for various reasons, be flexible enough to do that. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris to talk about the succession plan itself.
Great. Thank you, Bola. Wow, that was some fantastic information on how to develop your corporate strategic plan. I want to keep all of what Bola said in mind as I spend the next few minutes talking about how to develop a strategic plan for your retirement and financial life. As I talked about 2 weeks ago, for those that joined the webinar, one of the biggest mistakes made by business owners is not having a financial strategic plan in place. What I've found over and over again is that business owners don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. Let's walk through the steps needed to build that financial strategic plan that I'm talking about. So the first step is going to be, of course, you got to know where you are. So that's understanding your current financial situation. In my terminology, I say it's creating a net worth statement, figuring out what you have and what you owe. So things like your bank accounts, whether it's corporate bank accounts or personal bank accounts, investment accounts that you may have, retirement plans, IRA, 401k, whatever it may be. A picture of what your real estate is, whether it's your personal residence, a second home, or any investment real estate that you may have. Who do you owe money to? Any mortgages, personal loans? Are you personally guaranteeing a corporate loan? All those type of things is so important to understand before you even talk about getting to the next steps, which is creating a savings and investment plan. And the key takeaway here is I want to be very, very intentional about it. When I talk to successful business owners all the time, I ask them, oh, how much are you saving per year? Oh, I'm doing whatever the IRS lets me do with my 401k plan, whether it's $19,500 this year or they're over 50 and get to do catch up. But there's no thought process behind it. Is that the actual right amount? They say, well, if the IRS tells me that's what I should be saving, then that's what I should be saving. And I think we would all argue that the government doesn't always know what's in our best interest, especially when it comes with our personal finances on that side. But even if you are doing a good job saving toward your financial future, do you have a good investment plan in place? Is it all sitting in cash because we're scared of the coronavirus pandemic? Or am I scared about what the election is going to be? Am I scared about what's going to happen here? Or do you have, again, an intentional investment plan to take those savings to make sure that it's multiplying and growing with you? So what you got to do then is discuss and set those retirement and estate planning goals. And this may not just be you, it's with a spouse, children, grandchildren, really looking at the overall big picture about what's going on in your life and actually talking about what those goals are. And again, the key here is I really want you to draw a picture of your life. You can go on Google and various financial websites, the Wall Street Journal, et cetera, and they'll tell you need $1 million or you need $2 million. And that's a good benchmark and a good place to start. But again, I really want you to draw a picture of what your life looks like. Are you planning on traveling Europe once the vaccine comes out and we're free of the pandemic? Do you want to have a second home at the beach? Are you a stay-at-home hobby type person? Do you have goals that you want to help fund your kids or your grandkids' college education? All those things need to be talked about and gone through so that, again, the ultimate goal of this one is to begin to quantify exactly what that retirement and estate planning goals are going to look like. And that's going to be the most important step, is actually get a number behind what that is. Again, a ballpark like $1 million or $2 million or $3 million is a good place to start, but really digging down deep to understanding what that number is going to be what's most important. And that will tell you then what your gap analysis is. So we already did what you have currently. We know what your savings, and we know what you need. And ultimately, is there going to be a gap or a difference between those two? Again, for most of us and most business owners, there are. That's going to help you determine what the net sale proceeds need to be from when you sell your business. And that, again, that's a very, very important number that you need to have. Finally, then you need to actually do a business valuation. So I know what I need to sell my business for, but I need to find out what my business is worth. And again, is there any sort of difference between those two? If you're 3, 5, 7 years away from looking to sell the business, maybe you can do a more less expensive informal valuation. But if you're very close to wanting to sell your business, you need to spend the money for a full business valuation so you have a great idea exactly what that number is going to be. So my goal was to simplify this process for you, but please do not mistake simplicity for easy. Working with a professional with experience in this area will help you ask the right questions, challenge you where necessary, and make developing your financial strategic plan much more manageable. So now that we've gone through all that one, and I know what my gap analysis is, I know what my net sale proceeds are, it's going to determine what are my 2 goals out of this process. Can my business actually eliminate that gap? So in scenario number 1, for example, maybe I need $5 million net sales proceeds. I go through the formal valuation process. My business is only worth $1 million. Well, that tells me that over the next, again, 3, 5, 7 years, I need to build my business value to make sure that I'm narrowing or eliminating that gap. Or maybe you're in a situation where your business is already worth $3 million and your gap is $3 million. Well, of course, you still want to build your business and want to see it grow. But here your goal shifts to not necessarily focusing on building the value. It's how do I retain that value? So regardless of whether you're looking at goal 1 or 2, retaining and recruiting your employees, especially your key employees, is going to be one of the most important ways to retain that value. So why is that important? We have found that businesses that are unable to separate the owner from the business itself have far less value than businesses who create value outside of the owner. In most instances, buyers, especially third-party buyers, are going to want to see your key employees or management team continue for a time after the sale for continuity purposes. So one of the best ways to keep your employees happy and willing to stay through a transition is to have a top quality employee benefit plan. Just having one is not good enough anymore. You've got to have a top quality plan. So some of the benefits that we look at, again, a 401k retirement plan, for example. But here where we use the word balance all the time in the wealth management side, I want to use as we go through these next bullet points, because finding balance is going to be absolutely crucial. So when I say plan design, I'm talking about the actual features within the plan. So two big ones that we look at: eligibility. So what's best for the employer may not necessarily be what's best for the employee. So from the employer standpoint, maybe having a 6-month, 9-month, maybe even a 1-year eligibility period before an employee can join may be most beneficial for that employer. But if I'm a top talent out there looking at my options, and all things being equal, employee A lets me join the plan immediately versus employer B having me wait a year, that may swing me one way or another. So again, how do you find that balance there? Vesting is another thing. Again, if you're not familiar with the vesting concept, that's ownership of the funds in the 401k plan. So of course, as an employee, I want to be 100% vested in my account as soon as possible, because if I decide to leave, I want to be able to take the money with me. Well, again, from the employer standpoint, I want to have a vesting schedule to make sure that I'm encouraging and incentivizing my employees possibly to stay a little bit longer. Again, employer contributions are going to be the same thing with balance. As an employee, I would love not to have to save my own money. I would for an employer to save all the money for me. Well, we know that's not realistic in today's environment, but again, how do you find exactly what that balance is? I believe that fees, unfortunately, get all the press right now when we talk about retirement plans. And again, fees are obviously important, but fees have got to be looked at in the context of services and value being provided. And again, employees just aren't looking at fees. They're looking at the overall investment strategies, and they're looking for individualized education and advice. These are very good value-added services that can be provided to your normal retirement plan to bring up the quality of it overall. So some other ways, of course, are looking at more for your actual management team or key employees, a different type of executive compensation plans. Again, the goal here is that you want to incentivize your employees to stay not only to the sale, but potentially through the sale. So deferred compensation is a way to do that one, where you're just going to tell an employee, you know, if you stay with me through 2025, I've got some compensation for you on the back end to help incentivize you to stay. Yeah, if you decide to leave in the meantime, that's obviously your right as an employee, but you're going to forfeit what those ultimately funds are going to be. Or some sort of phantom stock. And I think we could do, between Jordan and I think we could do probably a 3-hour presentation on that aspect of it. There's all different types of strategies out there, and I don't want to get them all today, but ultimately as a business owner, you want your employees to feel and taste like they're owning the business, right? Without actually giving them ownership. So things like, again, phantom stock, stock appreciation rights, stock options, all these various strategies are out there to help do that one. And that you want your key employees especially to say, I want to participate in the growth of the business. But again, as employer, I don't necessarily want to transition actual ownership maybe to my key employees. And then finally, when you look at just your overall executive benefits in general, certainly salary and bonus are important things. But in environments where businesses are becoming a little bit more cash strapped, or again, because of the pandemic, maybe my revenue is not growing as much as it used to, and certainly my bottom line is not, how can I provide other benefits to provide that great experience for my employees? Could it be though working remotely, as a lot of firms are doing? How do I make that work-life balance? How do I create different benefit programs with vacation leave or PTO, paid time off, to really let my employees know that they're important to me, I need them, I value them, I want them to stay with me. And finally, building that right culture. So again, as we look at employees overall, ultimately employees are spending a third or more of their day at work. Well, maybe at home, but still hopefully doing that work. So creating an environment where employees can thrive is so very important. That begins with the culture of the company, like I just said, which Sonia's going to talk about here shortly. But first, I'm going to turn it back over to Jesse, who's going to talk about ways to achieve sales success.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So your guiding question when it comes to sales and this transition checklist we're talking about, the big guiding question is this built to function without me? One thing that a lot of business owners don't properly value is the clout that comes with being a business owner, and also the clout that comes with developing your relationships over years. So even those people under you who happen to have great relationships and build them, don't underestimate the value of you initiating those conversations, right? Of you initiating those relationships. So we need to look, as we're looking to transition, someone who's looking to buy your business wants to know, will this function without you as a business owner? And or can we continue to drive revenue once you're removed from that process? Okay, so what that looks like is you need to start with an assessment. You need to benchmark your current sales system, your people, and your practices. You need to see what the industry standards are so that when people come to look at buying your business, they have a proper understanding of where you fall within your industry. Second piece is lead generation. You know, again, that rainmaker business owner, once removed, this is something that a lot of professional services firms struggle with, is you'll have the names, you know, the names that are on the title there are, once they're removed, how do the leads get generated? Do you lose the clout that you've built institutionally for years? So you need to really evaluate that. Third piece is having a proven and repeatable sales process. So if you have a proven and repeatable sales process, it does two things. It shows that you have the ability to, that when somebody buys your business, they have the ability to make the choice of, hey, here's the sales process. We're going to just let the sales process run as written, as documented. Or it gives them the option to say, okay, we're going to put in our new sales process, but we know that these people can follow a sales process. It's not even necessarily the process itself. It's, can your employees follow a process? Do they have that in them? Are they stubborn? Are they resistant to change? So having a proven and repeatable sales process is key. Leverage technology and automation. As much as you can remove and kind of take away from human error, do it. You know, you need to really leverage that technology and automation, because there's going to be a lot of things that happen that you, as a business owner, you don't realize how much you're greasing the wheels of progress every day. And when you look at technology and automation, those things can help guide that process once you're removed from it. And then lastly, improve your sales management and salesperson performance. So when you look at sales success, you really need to improve the sales management. So the way that you document things, the way you track things, the way you help your salespeople psychologically, the way you manage information and marketing, those are really important things. So remember, guiding question, can this function without me? It's extremely important on the sales side. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to move this over to Sonia.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I'm going to actually be building quite a bit on what Chris was talking about earlier. So thanks for setting me up so nicely, Chris. First, I want to take a look at the importance of culture and making sure that you have a defined culture when you are going through that checklist of considering what you want your business to look like when you're getting ready to sell. Because culture is the backbone of your business when it comes to from a people standpoint. So really important to make that at the forefront of your planning. That if there's not a set culture or a feel to your business, to really give that some thought and some time. And that really breaks down into vision, which is basically painting a word picture of what you want the future of your business to look like. And as many of us know, 2020 has caused us to make significant shifts or pivots in our businesses. And so now's the time to revisit that vision and see if it has in fact shifted or pivoted at all in a way that would impact how your vision statement is put together and how that would play into the succession planning for your business. And then next, we would want to look at your mission, which then flows down from it. And that is really your purpose for existing, which shouldn't have shifted too much. And then looking at core values. And core values are so important because they really are the defining parameters for what your business is and what it's not. And they're also the defining parameters for hiring and firing staff. That's how you know who does and doesn't fit on your team. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then next we want to take a look at best people in the right positions, or as Jim Collins would put it from his bestseller, Good to Great, having the right people in the right seats. Super important. And again, Chris was talking about this, the importance of, a prospective buyer being able to look at the people that you already have on your team and how that plays out for them. So it's looking at a strengths identification based upon what you've defined as your business needs, coming down from your culture definition. Then knowing who you actually have on your staff team from a strengths perspective. So if you don't have some sort of a strengths assessment tool that you use to really identify the strengths of the people on your team, I can certainly recommend one. There are many out there to be had, but really important to know who you have, because that's a way that you identify the performance gaps within your staff team, and then move toward balanced diversification, making sure that you have skill sets completely represented across the board in your organization, and that you don't have ongoing performance gaps. And then finally, that leads you to hire strategically. You know exactly who it is that you're looking for and what gaps they need to fill within the organization to make it as appealing as possible. So it's kind of like what Chris was saying when he said a financial analysis, a financial gap analysis, I think he said. This is a staffing gap analysis. Okay, so next we want to look at what does it take to attract great talent. So when looking to attract great talent, it's really crucial to consider what selling points you have to offer. And again, Chris was talking about this earlier from a benefits package standpoint. But you also want to consider, from a people standpoint, what is it that would make people want to work for your business? What would make them want to be part of where you're headed with your business? And it's not so different from what a prospective buyer might be looking at. So candidates are definitely smart shoppers, and really until COVID hit, it was an employees market, and it really still is for the top talent that's out there. So they are some of the things that they might be looking for are, an updated and appealing website, a positive social media presence, great testimonials, solid customer reviews, and then again, as Chris mentioned, that comprehensive benefits package that doesn't always just come down to money. That comes down to a well-rounded package that those great employees might say, yeah, that is a selling point for me. And then next, just really thinking about who is it that you're looking for. Remember back to the previous slide where we were talking about balanced diversification. Knowing what those gaps are, and then defining as much as possible who it is that you're looking for. And a great measure that I would recommend to use for this is from a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, taken from the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's a system called GWC. And it's really looking at, do these people get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And it's just a great way to see whether or not somebody's actually going to fit on your team, and a great way to make your final decisions with attracting that great talent. And then always, always, always use a consistent hiring process. You want to be looking at the same variables across the board, so that when you're making your decisions, you're comparing apples to apples, and know that you've done the same things with each candidate. And then finally, seeking input from both inside and outside sources. So when we look at inside sources, other key team members who, may be vested in the organization and may be interacting quite a bit with the person you're bringing on board, getting some input from them. And then also outside sources, trusted business advisors, recruiters, whatever it may be, to make sure that as you're looking at those gaps that you have, and you're keeping the selling of your business in mind, that you're filling those gaps with the right people. And then finally, we want to look at the importance of developing and retaining the great employees once you bring them on. Once you get them, how do you keep them? So it's taking a look at that ongoing evaluation. I'll go back to that GWC. It doesn't only apply when you're bringing somebody on board. It also applies as you're looking at the employees as time goes by. And so one of the things that I want to point out here is that the really great talent, they are definitely paying attention to how you're addressing underperforming employees. They want to see that action is going to be taken to address issues where they're probably not going to stay on board. So something important to continue or to consider. And next, taking a look at the fact that timely and appropriate communication is so important. One of the things I talked about last time, when you're looking at a checklist for selling your business, is as you're planning what that's going to look like when you sell and you're developing those key employees from within, making sure that you're thinking about how people are wired and how they would want to receive that communication from you. The example I shared last time was a business owner who actually had a key employee designated to take on a much larger role when they sold the business. But when it came down to it, the way they communicated it to the whole team, including this key employee, all at the same time. And it really didn't take into consideration her particular personality and how she would have received that. And it just didn't end up going the way they had planned. So very important to consider who your people are and the timeliness of that communication. And then next, looking at intentional training and development opportunities so that as you're thinking about selling, you've got the people trained and ready to take on extra responsibilities at that point in time, that you're proactive about that. And then lastly, taking a look at the importance of celebrating team success. Again, the great employees want to know that you have their backs, that you care about them, and that you appreciate them. So taking time out to appreciate and tell people that they've done a great job and celebrate team success together is very important to have that camaraderie and have that team in place, that when you're ready to sell, you've got a great team to offer. And I think I'm handing it over to Jordan at this point to talk about contracts.
Yes, and I'm actually going to hop in real quick, Sonia, just to kind of give Jordan a minute here. We're going to transition the slides real quickly. But I wanted to thank everybody again so much for attending. I have to hop off real quick, but he's going to pull up the slides and we should be good to go. So Jordan, how's it come along? Do you have a copy of it?
Yeah, I do. I think I have the slides right here.
Okay, and we're on slide 13, I believe.
If I click this, can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Oh, share. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And you cannot see my entire desktop. You can just see my slides.
We can just see your slides.
Yes.
Wonderful. I did it. Okay. So thank you, Jesse. Thank
you, guys.
Thanks for bridging the gap there.
Yeah.
So I want to do a couple things here. One thing that I want to do is I want to briefly explain what you should really have in place, or business owners should have in place in advance of approaching buyers for the potential sale of their business. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to walk everyone through what to expect in the process of selling, which I'll break down and split between an internal succession and an external succession, or sale to third party. And so with that background, in advance of the sale, the business owner really needs to do a couple key things that are all really related. And that is, you gotta get your books and records in order. Now, what does that mean? I spoke briefly in the last meeting about making sure that books and records are updated to be consistent with the law. So there's constantly changes in the law, and if you have contracts, you're going to want to review those contracts and make sure that they reflect any changes to the law or regulations that apply to your business. The second thing in that is to check your contracts to make sure that they are assignable. One key thing that I do in all of my contracts now is when I'm representing the company, I'm making sure that that contract is assignable on a sale of the business. And that way, it's a lot of contracts that you may see these days are going to say that the contract is not assignable without the prior written consent of everybody, which is great. It protects you. You feel comfortable. But the problem is when it comes time to sell the business, now you need to go out and get the written consent of everyone who's a party to that contract. And that could be a huge problem. So go ahead and make sure that, that those contracts permit assignability. The next thing is, if you are a corporation, you should be having annual meetings of the shareholders and the directors. So that's part of the requirements of being a corporation. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping up with those maintenance requirements in advance of a sale. And then finally, in terms of updating your books and records, I wanted to mention that if there's ever been any transfer of ownership in the past, there has to be documentation. I've seen too many deals go sideways where there was no documentation. I'm working on one right now where a former owner may potentially own a third of the business, and the current business owner of the other 2/3 is looking to sell. And this is going to be a huge problem that we may need to go out and get the consent of this other party to a transfer of ownership. So very important that you go back and make sure everything is properly documented, all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So with that being said, let me switch over. I want to talk about the process a little bit. Internal succession will break down between corporations and LLCs. Within a corporation, you're probably going to have one or two approaches when it comes to your succession plan. One of them is going to be some sort of limited structure, stock with strings attached, we'll call it. And the other will be a structure where you're going to grant or sell pure stock in the company. So when it comes to restricted stock, some of the things we can think about are, and Chris mentioned some of them a little bit earlier, but restricted stock plans, stock options, stock appreciation units. And what unites all of them is that we're going to have some form of stock plan. That stock plan is going to describe all of the rights and obligations and rules that apply to this restricted stock. Some of it may be vested, some of it may be unvested. And the idea between vesting and unvesting is that some of the stock may not be available to be issued to the key employee until a certain amount of time has passed or metrics have been hit or something like that. And it serves as a disincentive to the key employee to leave the company. Eventually, once those rights are vested and they can be exercised by the key employee, there's going to be a grant agreement granting those units or stock to the employee. And then finally, a stockholder agreement, which will really govern the rights among the stockholders. If alternatively, I should say, you may grant straight stock to your key employee or other target buyer. If that's the case, then the stock is going to be either non-voting or voting, but there's no question that it's vested because it's already been issued. And certainly, as is the case, you're going to want a stockholders agreement. In an LLC, the options are very much similar. We're going to have the same restricted units, a restricted unit plan, which can be vested or unvested. You could grant pure equity in the LLC, just like we talked about before with stock in the corporation. The only difference here is that the LLC offers the opportunity to grant profits interest. I won't go into detail on what the profits interest is, and I know we have some accountants on the call that can, they don't need me to tell them what it is. But essentially, for those that are not familiar with the profits interest, it's commonly used for a key employee in exchange for services. So the company is going to grant the key employee a certain percentage interest, a profits interest in the company, and it's tied to a value of the company. And so if the company's worth $1 million and I'm the employee and I get a 10% profits interest, I do not have 10% of this $1 million company. What I'm only getting is 10% of the appreciation in the value of the company. And because there's really no there's no value of the units at the time they're granted, there are some tax advantages to the employee if you use that type of interest. And with all of these, again, at the very end of the day, you're going to have an operating agreement. When it comes to external succession, a lot of people ask me, when is it that an attorney should get involved when someone's contemplating selling their business to an outsider. It's never too early. Like I mentioned before, I can get involved and review the contracts and see if there's anything that can, be updated. But when you look at this timeline here, what you can expect, there's no reason that attorneys shouldn't be involved throughout the process. So the first thing you can expect is a non-disclosure agreement, which allows the parties to share confidential information about one another without fear that it's going to be misappropriated. Next, there's going to be a letter of intent. The letter of intent, some people, I've seen plenty of template letters of intent that really don't capture the full intent of the parties. So what I mean by that is it's obvious that a letter of intent, it's going to separate and identify whether or not this is going to be a stock or asset purchase. Easy, right? But then it gets a little bit more complicated. We're going to have the purchase price. How is it paid? Is it all paid up front? Is there a seller note that it's paid over time? Is part of it going to be held back in escrow in order to protect the buyer from the representations and warranties that the seller is making on the business, that they are true and correct? And then there's other conditions that are going to be required prior to closing. So if the consent of the landlord to the deal is a condition to closing, we should make sure that that's in the letter of intent. If financing is required prior to closing, we're going to want to make sure that that's in the letter of intent. And so for those reasons, I do recommend that an attorney is used to prepare the letter of intent. Once the letter of intent is accepted and agreed to by the parties, a stock or asset purchase agreement, depending on the structure of the transaction, will begin to be drafted. And so typically it is the buyer's, the buyer has the option to use his or her attorney to prepare the purchase agreement. And you're really at an advantage, whoever gets to prepare the purchase agreement, because those terms are going to be skewed in your favor. So the purchase agreement is going to be drafted simultaneously with due diligence, being completed, and ancillary documents being prepared. Ancillary documents being, for example, if it's paid over time, a promissory note, if there's an employment agreement post-closing, the employment agreement is being drafted. And eventually, all these things are going to come together all at once, and we're going to have a closing. And pre-COVID, that would certainly, we would at least have the option of being in person, and everyone can sign together and shake hands. And even pre-COVID, but more so certainly now, it's really an electronic exchange of documents. And then finally, one of the things that may be negotiated in the stock and asset purchase agreement are post-closing covenants. And so that's something that occurs post-closing. And so you need to be aware of any earnouts that can be earned after closing, any restrictive covenants that apply, non-compete, non-solicitation. And finally, I shouldn't say finally, because there's a host of different covenants that could apply, but these are just examples. But the final example I wanted to give is with bulk sale taxes and other taxes that may be due. In the state of Maryland, there is a bulk sales act that applies, and 6% of the price of tangible personal property is taxed. And there's sometimes a question of who owes that tax to the state of Maryland. So that hopefully gives everyone a good sense of what to expect in the process. And I will turn it over. I think it's Bola from here.
Yes, thank you, Jordan. I believe the slides are showing up a bit late for me, but I do have them up. So hopefully you guys are seeing the next slide, which is managing by the numbers. Ultimately, running a successful business requires that you are constantly doing a thorough analysis of your business just to get a sense for how well you're doing, number one, internally against the goals that you've set for yourself. But as you're looking to optimize your operations, particularly if you're getting ready to sell your business, now you want to make sure that you are running your business fairly closely to how others in your industry are running it if you're going to get top value for the business. So it's important to make sure you're benchmarking various parts of your operations to your industry of a similar size, geographic regions, and getting ideas for what they're doing, what sort of systems they're using, what automation opportunities that they're leveraging, what processes do they have in place, what do their revenues look like. All of these are going to be important, particularly as you put together your strategic plan, because now you want to make sure that you are running your business so that you can get top dollars for it. The business metrics that then come as a result of the action plans or goals or initiatives that you are working towards are called KPIs. So these are key performance indicators, which allows you to really show your progress against the targets. So next slide. KPIs can be can really track various aspects of your business. They really show, once again, the progress that you're making towards your goal, and they can really be in various categories. We've talked about sales on this call, the importance of culture, the human aspects of your organization, but ultimately there are various metrics that can be focused on tracking different aspects of your organization. What we have here are sales metrics, your financial metrics, project management, also known as your operations metrics. So how well are you delivering against the initiatives and the projects that you're working towards, which also involves the people component, the resources, how well you're leveraging your time, processes, et cetera. And then of course, marketing is another key KPI as well for you to consider tracking. Next slide, please. So as you're looking to get your business ready for sale, I talked earlier about, the importance of really just understanding what are the key metrics that your business will be gauged in against. A savvy potential business owner already knows what those are, and there are different sort of valuations that they will apply to your business depending on the nature of your business, and also depending on how the valuation is come about. So you also want to make sure you have a sense for what potential valuations will look like and be able to speak the numbers against potential buyers when they do come looking to get a better sense for your business. So there are various multiples that your industry will typically be used or will be considered when you're getting ready to sell your business. There are comparables for how others have done. And then there's discounted cash flows, which takes into consideration current and future cash flows that can be generated by your business, which will then be discounted to the current day to really get a sense for what that business could be worth. And then that being the case, there are various levers that can be pulled to really make sure that you get the best valuation. So here I've listed 9 KPIs that you can consider tracking. Ultimately, they will vary, they can change, they can be really set up to really made specific to your industry. But anything from the amount of leads that you're getting on a monthly basis to your ability to convert your clients, what that conversion rates looks like, your customer acquisition costs, or even your ability to keep your customer for a specific period of time. What does that average time look like for any given customer that you acquire for your business? Sales revenues is going to be important. A lot of valuations are done against the revenues. So you also want to make sure that you're keeping track of that. What should that look like and what should you be tracking as an organization? Gross margin, net profit margins are other metrics that are typically used when it comes to multiples for valuations. And then in terms of how well your organization is running, from a process optimization, automation, making things less manual, and really just making sure that your staff is empowered to really work and is empowered to meet the goals that you're setting for them. It's also important to make sure that you're tracking your met versus overdue milestones. That gives the buyer a sense for how well your organization is structured and what sort of work they will have to bring to bear to make sure that the staff is performing at the level that they should be. A lot of times, buyers are looking for ways to really gain additional value in the business. And a quick way could be discounting what the staff is doing, or perhaps switching the staff over and bringing their own staff in to really bring that organization to the level that they should be performing at. So if you already have strategies in place to make sure that your organization is performing at the level that it should be, so you're essentially squeezing the value from the potential benefit that the buyer can get, and you're ultimately getting the best value for yourself before you sell the business. Resource utilization is another one. And ultimately, employee happiness is key, and there are various ways to measure that. I know Sonia spoke a great deal about communication, making sure you are training and really providing, putting the best employee in the best role. Once again, if a potential buyer is coming in and they're not going to have to bring their own staff, train them, you're essentially positioning yourself to really get the best value for your organization. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the various types of KPIs that you can consider. This is not a comprehensive list. It's just an area that you can start to track, particularly as you put your strategic plan together. There are various initiatives that you're working towards, either prioritizing sales or financials, marketing, human resources. There's specific metrics that you can then look to track and then benchmarking against your industry to ensure that you're tracking the right set of metrics. And then lastly, on the last slide, it's a dashboard. As a business owner, as the executive, at any given point, you want to have a sense for how well your business is doing. So a lot of times we're working with reports that are not readily providing insights to us. So it makes it difficult for us to see how well we're doing from a month-to-month basis. Are we trending upwards, downwards? Are we staying flat? Are there areas of our business that we really need to drill down into versus just reading a report that is static and saying how things are looking at any given point? A dashboard really provides you a much more robust insight. Historical data allows you to drill down to get a sense for where issues could be. So ultimately, once you've decided what the metrics should be, putting together a dashboard, which these days there's so many tools that are available that will allow you to really throw the numbers against the dashboard so that you can then really have a picture not only for yourself, but have something ready for potential buyers to take a look at to see how well you've been optimizing your business based on the work that you've done. So in summary, have a sense for the metrics that you should be tracking based on the benchmarking analysis that you've done for your industry, the size of your organization, the geographic region. Identify the right set of metrics, and then make sure you put it onto a dashboard so that you can quickly get a sense for the insights that you can then share with potential buyers. All right, so with that, I will turn it over to, I guess, Jim, who will be leading the Q&A session.
Yeah, wow, that was very, very informative. We certainly covered a lot, from strategic plan to succession plan, a little bit about sales, culture and hiring, contracts, and then finished up with metrics. So there is one question in the chat room, and that is,